Well, hello you. This is Shane from Shane's Books and Review, and I'm glad you made it back today. Today we're going to be talking about a surprise book. Do you remember last year when we talked about a little book by the name of Medusa? It was wrote by Emily Devenport, and it was narrated by Caitlin Davis. And now there's a second one, and its name is Medusa In The Graveyard. And it's been quite some time since we've talked about that, so I might give a little bit of backstory on it. But with that being said, is this book worth your time, efforts, and energies, and money? The first thing I want to talk about is the narrations. I know that sometimes I'm very harsh whenever it comes to that, but there's a reason. Something that is a thing you enjoy doing, you strive to do the best that you can with it. Sometimes, if not rarely, there's a particular voice type that I don't care who you are. There's always a voice type that you'll hear and you'll, maybe I need to address that in the beginning whenever I come across that. Now, that's not the case with Caitlin Davis. Not at all. In fact, I have found that her voice in this book really lends a strong edge to the characters and the timing, the way that she talks. It's really well put together. The audio quality from Audible, which is where I usually get most of my audiobooks from, is very high. And the production aspects of it is also really good as well. There's none of that telltale hum sound. The voices that she does, they're not clipped over top of themselves. And so overall, listening to this has been a very enjoyable experience for me. Now, a little bit about the other book. Whenever we start that journey on the first one, we're introduced to this character by the name of Ouija. And Ouija, she's considered and classified as a worm, somebody that crawls through the interiors of the ship, part of the servant class of the Olympia, I believe was the name of the ship. So she's got all these things that are kind of stacked against her whenever it comes to class. They insert these chips into people's heads that allow the dominant people of their ship to be able to actually make people servants and servitude and make them want to do those sorts of things, as well as communicate, etc. Well, Luigi, she's got a very interesting story in front of her from that point moving forward. Her dad and her mom had imparted a database of music into her head and her chip, but there was also something kind of like a virus that was laying dormant in there. And whenever it kicks in, she ends up becoming an assassin. We see how cutthroat she is throughout the entire book of the first one. There's effects to that. So for Emily Devenport, I want to say thank you for actually giving your book a bit of a conscience. It's not that the first one was overly violent or anything like that. It was in the story and it served a purpose. It wasn't just assassin walks into a room with bunches of people, could be kids, clowns, nuns, etc., and slaughters them because they dropped their toothpick. I mean, it wasn't anything absurd like that. There was a point behind it. It moved the plot along, and it was accumulated into a really good book. A very enjoyable book. There was also this sub-story underneath it where it had to do with Medusa, the Medusa units. It was that virus that I mentioned that allowed her to be able to interface with that, and they become chummy, somewhat friends. They start working together as a team. There's a thing that happens towards the end of the book where they have to go somewhere. They affect all these little items and things to happen to manipulate them into that path. Well, now comes the second book. And I want to say the second book, quite a good thing. Now, typically whenever I enjoy a book, it's because of incredible cleverness, right? It's because the author has done this to set up this, and it's like a little chess game, and you don't know what's going to happen and where. Some of the things on Emily's book here has not been deceitfully clever, but thought out. Now, let me explain the difference. Deceitful clever would be trying to trick you into thinking this is what's happening, and then you find out at the end, no, that's not what was happening at all. It was this. Much like the old spaghetti westerns, whenever they would have these cliffhangers, because literally somebody was hanging off the cliff every other week. But then whenever you get back to the show, they're not actually in the position that they were whenever you quit watching it. Come on, we're smarter than that. But on the same token, that's kind of what that deceitful clever is. Now, on the other hand, thoughtfully clever is whenever you set up devices and things books ahead or in the beginning of the book. And it's not that they're not necessarily mentioned. They're brought up from time to time throughout the series, but you don't really understand or know what it's for because it hasn't been unveiled yet. And then whenever those devices and things get unveiled, or you see the accumulation effect of, that would be the thoughtful cleverness that I'm referencing. And that's what she's pulled off. She's done a really good job with this book. I've enjoyed it from the beginning because it's been quite some time since I read that first one. It was almost like revisiting with a good friend that you haven't seen, but you really should visit in quite some time. Plot devices inside of the book are plentiful. There are things, paradoxes, conundrums, not to be confused with Jeff Conundrum, the worst insurance salesman in the multiverse. But it all comes out to be a book that I personally think is worth your time for sure. And the effort is effortless because it's a burner. You can just get through it so quick. Well, the story's interesting. And with those two things, of course, it's going to be worth your money. What are some of the feelings that I had about this book? Well, I don't want to give away the whole kit caboodle, so I don't really want to get into it. But we'll say that it's a book of journey. Yeah? And when you read it, that'll make sense. And it's a journey that's not parallel or straight or contiguous or any of those words. It's a journey that splits and forks of time. It's interesting to see how that plays out. Instead of using that in a bad way, Emily Devenport has instead decided to use it as sometimes comedy relief, not cheapening the story, by the way, but also for reflection. So we watch Ouija go from this I am the ultimate of the food chain, I am on top, to losing a lot of her companions. Not by death, don't worry. It is what it is, but it will make sense whenever you get to that point. In the beginning of the book, there's a prophecy that's kind of given to her, but it's not a prophecy. There's these big entities. It's brought up multiple times, and she thinks that she's nailed it every time, but she doesn't realize whenever it actually does come around that that's where that was talking about be yourself. Just announce who you are, what you've been through, and what that has cost you. But the good thing is those words caused her throughout this book to really examine her deeds and herself and the things that had affected around her, as well as the people and the emotions that they had created around her as well. Now, it doesn't really drone on and on and on about that, but you can get from inflection or putting yourself in her shoes that this would be a very finding type of a thing for her to have to go through. And now it is that time. It is time for question of the week. Myself, if I found myself in that kind of a situation, let's say the story wasn't fiction, if it was real, let's say that I ended up getting a Medusa unit, I think that with that interface and with the way that my mind works, that I would be able to do so much more in cognition and being able to aid in situations around me. Not just because of machine of war type stuff. That's not why. It's because of the abilities that would give you that you don't inherently have on your own. I mean, we are kind of cyborgs in a way, loosely. Because, I mean, think about it. We're a highly connected society for the most part now. But because of those devices and the way that we're intermingled into it, our digital wellness and digital being, as we are, is another layer of humanity. So we are kind of cyborgs. That's my point. Because we are attached to machines at this point. So the question of the week is if you had a Medusa unit yourself that had bonded to you from this storyline, what would you affect around you? This won't be judgmental whenever I say this. Whatever you want. Let me know in the comment section down below, and I will splash those up after this video comes out. Now, in a couple weeks' time, I'm not sure exactly what book we're going to get into. Because, how about this? User choice 2 weeks from now. But after this video, let me know what book I should check out. I'll pick whichever one that seems the most interesting, and that's the one we'll talk about. Like, share, subscribe. This is Shane from Shane's Books and Review. I hope that your upcoming week is a great one. And I will see you in the next video. Oh yeah, YouTube, it thinks you want to see one of those 2 videos right there. So if you want to, go ahead and click one.